It was on the evening of November 2013 that she received the phone call that would forever darken her life. It was her mother, Giselle Pellicott, who called her. That day, my mother told me that she had discovered that Dominic, my father, had been raping her for 10 years, sexually abusing her with different men. When Carolyn hears this, she says, "I've lost the meaning of life. I remember screaming, crying, and swearing," says Carolyn, describing the situation as an earthquake and a terrifying storm. Dominic Pellicott, who had been raping his wife for years and raped by more than 50 men, was sentenced to 20 years in prison in December after a historic 3-month trial. Carolyn says her father should die in prison. 50 men who recruited Dominic via the internet to come and rape his estranged wife have been sentenced to prison by a court. The incident came to light after the man was caught taking photos under women's skirts in a store. That's how the person's computer was searched. Giselle Pellicott was raped by more than 80 men over the years while her ex-husband was intoxicated. This took place over a period of 10 years, and thousands of videos and photos were found on his computer, showing the man repeatedly raping his wife and inviting strangers to his home. She learned from the police that her husband, who she had been married to for 5 decades, had raped her by more than 80 men and filmed the act. The number of men involved in the rape has shocked France. Of the 83 men seen in the video, police were only able to identify 50. They range in age from 26 to 68 and are from a variety of professions. They include firefighters, pharmacists, nurses, prison guards, and journalists. Many are fathers and husbands. Police reveal that one of them raped her 6 times, knowing that he had HIV in his blood. Although she was not infected with the disease, a health professional testified that she was infected with other sexually transmitted diseases. In addition, it was stated that she had developed numerous health problems. In addition to highlighting the horrific crimes of Dominic's trial, it has also sparked a discussion about the lesser-known phenomenon of drug-induced sexual assault. Carolyn has now made it her life's calling to fight drug-fueled violence. Victims who are raped under the influence of drugs often do not report the assault because they do not remember it and may not even realize they are being abused. Darian is fighting to make the voices of victimized women heard in the days following her mother's heartbreaking phone call. Carolyn and her brothers Florian and David traveled to their family's home in Maison, southern France, to be by their mother's side. Carolyn now says it was a traumatic moment when her mother realized that her husband was one of the worst criminals we've seen in the last 20 or 30 years. Soon, Carolyn herself was called by the police and heard another incident that would darken her world. The police showed her to photos they said were found on her father's laptop. In the photo, a woman, dressed only in a t-shirt and a pair of sandals, is seen lying unconscious on a bed. At first, she couldn't recognize this person as herself. "I couldn't even recognize myself," says Carolyn. Then the police officer said, "The same brown mark on your cheek is in the photo. It's you." Then I looked at the 2 photos differently. I was lying on my left side, like my mother does in all her photos. Carolyn says she is certain her father raped her. Although the father denies this, his explanations regarding the explicit photos of his son are contradictory. "I know I was raped, probably for sexual assault. but I have no evidence, she says. Despite thousands of photos and videos showing what the father did to his wife, no evidence has been found against the child. The father was found guilty of raping the husband of Jean-Pierre Marchand, one of the defendants who raped his wife, and of taking indecent images of his daughter Carolyn and the children's parents. It's the same for many victims of abuse. They don't believe it. Because there's no evidence, they don't feel heard and they don't get support, she explains. After the horrific crimes committed by her father against her mother were revealed, Carolyn wrote a book about it. The book, titled I'll Never Call Him Dad Again, chronicles the trauma her family endured as a result of her father's abusive behavior. It also delves deeply into the abuse that comes with substance abuse. Painkillers, sedatives are all drugs, says Carolyn, who says assaults, especially those assisted by sedatives, are committed at home. Her mother says she found it difficult to accept that the man had assaulted her son, even though he had raped her more than 200 times. It's hard for my mother to accept all this suffering at once, she says. The 72-year-old victim of the attack, Giselle Pellicot, waived her right to anonymity under French law and made her story and herself public. Giselle has shown her courage and heroism by revealing her story and identity. It was very traumatic and horrible, but we had to get through it with dignity and strength, she explains. Carolyn now describes the terrible burden of having to reconcile being the daughter of a brutal man who committed horrific acts and a mother who was brutally assaulted. She never wants to think about the role the person she no longer calls her father and calls Dominic played in her childhood. Looking back, I don't see the father I thought I had. All I see is this criminal and courageous individual, she explains. Carolyn says she doesn't often accept the term monster that others describe her as. On the contrary, she says he was very aware of what he had done and never got sick. He is a dangerous man. There should never be a way for him to get out of prison. Never, she says, saying she wants her father to end up in prison. Dominique Pellicot, 72, who was sentenced to 20 years in prison, may never see his family again. The mother and her children are trying to recover from this tragedy and suffering. She says her husband, brothers, and 10-year-old son give me strength.